Everybody, welcome to Intro to Digital Photography. I'm your instructor, Rick Hearn. We have a new participant in the class today, Don Smith. So, Don, could you give just a very brief statement of what kinds of photography you like to do and what kinds of things you'd like to get out of taking a photography class?
I like to do vacation shots. I've got a small point and shoot digital camera, and it works well for my needs. It's easy to pack, and I can take it with me everywhere. And at some point I'm looking to upgrading to something with a little more zoom, and but for now that's perfectly fine. Okay, great. We have two homework assignments that never got looked at, and if they don't, that's okay. But for last week's class, we had done given a homework assignment to explore using your camera's flash. Did any of you take any shots with and without flash that you want to share with the group?
Yes, I did. I think okay. I didn't have a chance to show the walking around the neighborhood ones. Did we?
No, you didn't get to.
Homework? Walk around in the neighborhood shooting before the flash.
Okay, sure. Go ahead and share your screen then and show us what you did.
Okay, since I'm going to be gone next week, so I have three. I have the walk around, the flash, plus your last week's homework, shooting a moving subject. Okay, this is a walk around my neighborhood. I took random pictures on the scene or stuff I like, and I just quickly go over, see if you like it or you have comments on it. I would appreciate, since I have quite a few, so I'm going to go relatively quick unless you have comments. This first one is just the shadow and the brick wall kind of interested me, so I take that one. That's just, and the next one is the backlight of the green leaves. It attract me with the mailbox there.
Yeah. Backlit leaves will always get me.
Yeah, the leaves. This is a morning sunlight from the east. So this is just a tree stump was cutting down, and some random kids play with it. I found it. I walked by and see, what is this?
That is neat.
This is a pandemic thing, as you can see. It's a birthday celebration there.
Great.
Okay, yes, Rick?
No, I was just saying it's a great shot. It's neat the way people have found ways to celebrate without violating social distancing.
Yeah, and that doesn't need to be coronavirus related. You could do it anytime the kid turns 5. That's nice. I like the backlighting on the parasol.
The Japanese umbrella.
Mm-hmm.
Just a very pleasant experience.
Yeah, beautiful colors with the pink flowers at the bottom. Really nice.
Thank you. Next one is just a landscaping. I just like it. I like the maple tree there, the hydrangea down below, and with the palm kind of hanging over.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the palm is an example of putting a frame into the picture. It defines the left and top portions of the picture and does it very nicely.
That's beautiful.
And this is, Susan, can you see the pillow, the word on
Yes.
the pillow?
Yes.
Can you see that?
Let freedom ring. And on the other one, God bless something.
God bless, yeah.
Maybe it just says God bless.
And this is the same view, pulling back a little bit. This is the 4th of July weekend. You can see the American flags everywhere.
I think the first picture of the two works better for me. It
Me too.
illustrates that a simpler composition looks more coherent. The second picture, by having more stuff in it, there's more of a question of what's the picture about.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, it's a snapshot. Just try to include everything. That's usually my snapshot thing.
Yeah. As Rick said, trying to figure out in that previous picture what the subject is. The tree is the center.
Yeah, this is a picture.
This
I
is the
told
one
you
that
guys
almost got
last
you
time.
arrested.
Yeah, this is the picture that got the owner follow me and question me what you're doing there. I just can't, somehow the red Camaro just attract my eyes. I said, wow, that's a very nice.
Sure. Very flashy car, obviously.
Yeah. So I took a picture and then I go on doing more shooting, and the owner come in a red pickup truck and asked me, my neighbor was calling me, said somebody is taking photos of my car and my house, kind of. And can you explain what are you doing?
Oh dear.
Tell me.
Anyhow, my apologies for putting you in
I
confrontation
said that's
with your
Rick's
neighbors.
home assignment, and I like your car, the color contrast with your house, your pavement, your roof. And he finally said, "Oh, I take it as a compliment, I guess."
Good.
Okay, next one. I just like the walkways design, the weird curve, and it has.
Yeah, I like the composition of the hardscaping. It's nice, and the contrast against the greenery.
Yeah, this is one all the other one I show was taken from my cell phone. This is taken from my regular camera, and I imported to here. It was compressed. It was just something attract me, the setup of the furniture, yard furniture with a little urn, big urn there with a flower on the window eaves. And this is another shot of the same thing.
If you go back to the previous one. It looks like you have a ghost with a flower pot hat popping out of the urn.
I'm afraid of rearranging anybody's front porch there.
But you
that would get you in trouble.
You did
rearrange. This one is
yourself.
Nice in that it has a diagonal line composition from the close urn on the left to the medium wrought iron table, and then to the planter farther away on the right. This one works much better for me than the one that follows.
Nice light.
I try to find my arrow here to move the. Okay, this is a statuette. I don't know, you can see the information?
No.
Yeah,
no,
now
there's
you're
something right
screen.
up at the very top,
Okay.
very small.
Yeah, very small. I just read it out. I use it just to show the difference here. This is without a flash. This is, I used the f1.4, a quick lens, 30 millimeters. So it appears I may not need a flash. It was light enough, but you can see at the edge, since I opened the aperture to the maximum, the edge of the photo is kind of blurry, not as focused.
It's also an illustration of how wonderful digital cameras have gotten compared to film. It shows that it was taken at ISO 5000, yet you really don't notice any particular noise in the image. That's a pretty spectacular example.
Yeah, at 5,000 at f1.4, so I didn't use a flash.
Yep.
Okay, this one I open up to f4.5. You can see the edge was a little bit sharper. The ISO becomes 6400. And I was lucky, I used 1/5 of a second. I handheld 1/5 of a second. I didn't shake much, so it turned out to be okay.
Yeah, that's pretty impressive.
Okay, this is the one with flash. As you can see, I put a background, but you can see it's very sharp, but this is direct flash, right on your face kind of thing. This one without a flash, and actually it was like 1/3 of a second. As you can see, it's blurry, it's shaking somewhat.
Yeah, but you also notice a difference in the look of the sculpture. The previous picture has these really bright highlights from the concentrated flash source, where the second picture doesn't have as glaring highlights. So in this particular case, the non-flash shot probably is doing a better job of giving a feeling for the sculpture.
Okay, this is a non-flash. Again, this is a 1/13 of a second. This is a pretty handheld. I use a different, I use a zoom lens. This is 18 millimeter, 6400 ISO without a flash with a 1/13 of a second exposure. This one was with flash, f4.5. Again, this is direct flash, so you can see the statuette here with a very strong reflection, and all the light also have a very strong reflection there. Okay, this is with a flash. I think I have bounced the light to the ceiling. I have a little pop-up flash. This camera's design, I can flip it to the top.
Great.
So
and that's a wonderful
softer
technique. As long as the ceiling in question is a fairly light neutral color and not too far above you, if you can arrange for the flash to bounce off of the ceiling, that's going to often be a much more pleasant picture than the direct flash from the camera. It won't be as much light thrown onto the subject with the bounce off the ceiling because some of that light will get absorbed or scattered, but it's much softer than the direct flash. So if you can do a bounce flash, great alternative.
Yeah, if you have more budget to have a separate flash, they have a little cover too. They call it diffuser or something.
Yes, exactly.
Give you a softer light. But with these on-camera pop-ups, a lot of them doesn't have the option to bounce top, but this one does. You have to use a finger kind of flip it up.
Great.
Okay, this is another one with a flash with a different background. I removed the black background. This is the one without flash, the same thing. So you can see the difference. Flash.
Yeah. So here you can see this picture really was helped by the flash. It just it makes the mug pop from the background. So this is a situation where the flash really helped.
This is no flash.
Yeah, this is just dull. The other one is as Rick says, it pops.
Much better.
Okay, this is again the same statuette. This is the one with a flash bounced to the ceiling. So you can see the color. this one without flash, you can see the tone is different. Flash, no flash, because I was using f2.2 1600 ISO, so it picture is clear, but the mood is different.
Yeah, part of that is that the white balancing of the camera came out a little bit different between the flash picture and the non-picture flash. See, this one has a more of a little bit of a yellowish brighter.
The background in
and-
particular is
Yeah, I'm looking at the background. Now
yellower.
move to the other picture. Look at the color of the background. See, this one is a more neutral gray color. It just gives a different emotion because of the change in color. Is either one better? No, but cameras do automatic white balancing if you've got them in the automation position. You can tell it.
Yeah, this one
in the menus.
It is auto. I didn't do any changes. I do have the option to make changes. I didn't.
For the most part, the auto white balancing of the cameras is really, really smart if there are skin tones in the picture. And it's good that it works with Caucasian skin tones and African and Asian. The cameras are very smart about producing believable looking skin tones. But the statue doesn't have any living skin tone in it. So the camera is a little bit at a loss as to what's the right white balance.
Okay, this is a blow up. I make it closer. This is no flash.
Uh-huh.
This is a direct flash, as you can see.
Wow.
Right.
And this is a bounced flash.
Now, looking at these two pictures, look at the wall surrounding the sleeve. You see a shadow, right?
Yeah.
Similarly, you see a shadow of the hand. And the shadow is fairly sharp-edged. That's because the on-camera flash has a lot of light coming from a very small area. It's pretty good approximation of a point source of light, rather than being a big diffuse pillow of light like you might see in studio photography. Here, where we bounced off the ceiling, we don't have that shadow at all. Is it better or worse? That's up to your judgment. But it's a very noticeable difference in the direct from the camera flash in the previous shot versus the off the ceiling flash in this shot. So
This
be
looks
aware.
so much cleaner.
Yeah, this shot is the better one in my opinion. Again, as long as your ceiling is reasonably close, so you're getting most of the light bounced and your ceiling isn't too heavily colored because it's going to color the reflected light, then a bounce flash off a ceiling is almost always a win over a direct flash.
For those of us who don't have that option, are there ways to minimize the shadow behind the object? Can you shoot from an angle, or because this is one of my problems with flash pictures is I tend to get the shadows.
As a general statement, on-camera flash is almost always the least desirable way to do a flash. If you look at fancier cameras, most of them don't have an on-camera flash at all. And the reason for that is that the companies believe that photographers who want to do flash photography, who have invested in a nice camera system, and by the way, your Sony 6400 is a very nice camera system. I'm not critiquing it here. The companies leave the flash off of the higher end cameras because they expect that the photographers will want to use an off-camera flash. That's obviously more awkward to do, but if you're working with on-camera flash, the main thing you could do here really would be to get the subject away from being quite so close to the background.
Yeah.
Here, I'm not sure that you can move the figurine, but if you could move the figurine farther away from the background,
Yeah.
the shadow wouldn't be quite so sharp and quite so in focus and quite so close to the
Right.
thing that it's shadowing.
Right.
This is
Okay.
not a zoom lens, so I kind of walk close to it. If you have a
Yeah.
zoom lens, you can back out a little bit, probably.
Yeah.
My camera does have a hot shoe for add-on flash. I haven't spent a few $100s to buy it.
Yeah, again, when I made that comment about on-camera flash, the Sony 6400 is a really, really nice camera. So the fact that it hasn't a built-in flash is not a, oh, how could you buy a cheap camera? Not at all. But if you get into flash photography, you're going to want to get into off-camera flash. It's just the nature of the beast. Okay, go ahead.
Okay, now I'm going to the moving subject. This is taken from my back wall of my backyard is leaning against the road. So this
Now
is
notice here that-
1,000th of a second.
Right, Shen is 1,000th of a second, and even though that car was probably not parked, is there any visual clue that the car was moving?
No, the car slows down, try to turn into the driveway to the left. So
Yeah.
This car is relatively slow. And so to me, everything's sharp, and you can see the wheel. You can see the person in there. I have other shots you would see was not as clear. This guy would slow down probably to 20 miles an hour, 15 miles an hour, ready to turn. So this is 1,000 second. Okay, here's another 1,000 of second. This lady is just going downhill. She's not turning. It's still, to me, is still relatively clean. With 1,000 second, you can see.
Notice that neither case were the wheels blurred, neither case is the background blurred. So this is what you get with a moderate speed of the moving object and a very fast shutter speed.
Yeah, this one is f2.8, so the background is not very clear because the depth of field is kind of shallow.
Right.
This one also is 3.2, f3.2, so the background is also kind of shallow. Okay, this one is f2.5, 1,000 a second. Okay, this one is really close to me. He's probably less than 5 feet away, and he's ramping up the hill at 30, 35 miles an hour. So it's real short. I have to grab it real fast. As you can see, the background is very blurry. I think I may have moved my camera also.
Yeah, I'm going to guess here that you were actually instinctively following the truck, and the reason the driver's profile is really quite sharp and the background is blurrier is only partly depth of field. It's also that the camera probably panned against the background just a little bit in that 1,000th of a second.
Okay, here is 100th of a second. This is 100th of a second.
And you can see that
F11.
even without looking at the details because the wheels are turning, okay? You know this is a slower shutter speed because it had enough time for the wheel to turn probably 10 degrees while the shutter was open.
I think I panned a little bit so the wheel is more blurry than the body of the car.
Well, the wheel
that's going to be because the wheel is going fast and the body of the car is going medium speed.
Again, this one is real close, 5 feet from the camera and 1,000 of a second. So you can see it's still kind of blurry on the wheel spoke.
Yeah.
This is the 100th of a feet, 100 of a second. I did pan it so you can see the background is quite blurry. The wheel spoke is blurry, but the car body itself is reasonable clear.
Which is great, because remember how I talked about how the flash made your Santa mug pop out of the background? That's the same effect that the pan is happening here. With the fairly slow shutter speed and following the subject moving side to side, you've got, other than the wheels, the car is really pretty sharp. The wheels are showing blur, which is implying that motion of the car. But the background isn't just out of focus blurry. The background is blurry because in the 100th of a second, the camera moved side to side a significant distance, and it created the background blur, particularly noticeable on the 15-mile-per-hour sign and the street sign above the stop sign. This is panning with the subject with a slow shutter speed, and it makes the subject really pop out of the background.
Yeah, this is what I try to learn. I see those sport pictures, they make the move. And yeah, the race car, your race car, you like race car photo, you must know this very well.
What I discovered in my time selling pictures of race cars is that the panning shot was the one that people would pay for. That was my money shot.
This is, again, a 100th of a second shot. You can see, again, the same effect. The car is reasonably clear. The other are blurry.
And yet you have the wheel blur to show that it really is moving.
Okay.
Okay, this is 250 second, and you can see the whole thing is blurry. This is a very close shot. This is 1,000th second. The whole thing is almost freeze. This is the last. This is the 500th of a second close shot. I think I did pan this one.
Yep. Good job.
Yeah,
all right.
Excellent. That does a great job of illustrating what I was after. Thank you so much, Shen.
So it was playing with it, but following this bicycle practically. And I was able to get the background screwy. What I noticed was that in following whatever it was I was following, it was difficult to keep my camera steady enough to not blur it. You know, the
camera shake
image I wanted.
Yeah.
But
Bonnie?
I think, yes, sir.
I have to quote my favorite joke here.
Oh,
Guy
dear.
on the street in New York is really having a hard time. He finally walks up to a street corner musician and says, "How do I get to Carnegie Hall?" And the guy says, "Practice, practice, practice." That's how you get to the point where you can band with the guy on the motorcycle.
Very good. So anyway, that was the best.
Benny, what's camera speed you use on that picture?
I was afraid you would ask something like that, and I'm not going to be able to answer it.
I mean, it wasn't 1,000th of a second. You can tell that it had to be more like a 250th or 100th of a second, like you were using on your slower one, Shen. What's kind of neat in this picture is that it illustrates a second level effect of panning, okay? The guy on the motorcycle is fairly sharp, okay? His helmet is pretty sharply defined. You see his backpack strap and so on, pretty sharp. So you were following his motion and you were fairly successful at it. The spokes on the motorcycle wheels are hard to see because of the the picture got overexposed, but they're not frozen. Okay, the spokes are blurred out. It's hard to see it because of the overexposure, but then the general background of the circle of orange is motion blurred going from right to left because the camera was following the motorcycle from left to right. Here's the really cool thing. If you look at the girl with her hat, she actually, I think, is a little bit more blurred than the general background. And that's because she was going from right to left. So her motion relative to the camera is faster than the motion of the buildings, which weren't moving. Am I making any sense?
Yeah,
Yeah.
Perfect. And it was taken at a 30th of a second. So
Wow.
the trick here is that the motorcycle was probably moving a little bit slower than most of the cars in Shen's pictures. So the 30th of a second is only modestly more background blur with the pan than Shen's 100th of a second was. But it is more background blur. You know, you can see that the buildings have more side-to-side blur in this 30th of a second picture of Bonnie's than the background in Shen's picture at 100th of a second had side-to-side
Now,
blur.
ISO 100, that's like the ASA was in the olden days, right?
Yes.
Right. This one's ISO 800, though, rather than
Right.
100.
Okay.
Yes, same thing as ASA. Just simply they went from the American standard to the international standard.
Okay. My focus was to mess with that shutter speed. I wanted to mess with just one thing at a time. Otherwise, my brain freezes. So,
Notice,
but that's
as
good
they,
information. So it gets me looking at everything, and I appreciate that a lot. Oh, shoot. This was, to me, absolutely thrilling. It just looks like crystal.
it does.
And
It does.
clearly it was on a very quick shutter speed.
Exactly. The water
And
is
that's
frozen.
what
You
I
see the
was
droplets.
fooling. Yeah, that's what I was fooling with was the shutter speed. And
Perfect.
so it just was thrilling to me. Now I hated the tree. And you guys, I went back the next day because I saw there's a palm tree on one side, on this side, and then this tree on this side. But I went back to find a place where, where there's no tree and there's no such animal over at the orange circle.
Yeah.
But the sparkle of this one versus this one, which did have a tree behind it, it's so much duller on the second one.
Yeah, what happened here is that with the slower shutter speed here, you had some camera shake while you had the shutter open.
Oh, did I? Okay.
Yeah, it's a gut feel kind of a thing, but after you've looked at a lot of pictures taken with slow shutter speed, you can develop a sense for what is subject motion blur, moving water, and what is camera motion blur, shaking camera. And the second picture you showed us with the tree behind, this one has a feeling of the camera moved as much as the water moving.
Could be. I didn't have the ability to multitask into all the different things that needed to be adjusted. So I just let the shutter speed guide everything. But just
let me share a secret for slow shutter speed photography. The slower your shutter speed is, specifically if you're working handheld, not on a tripod or a monopod, what you want to do is to be able to take a whole bunch of pictures of the same thing. And the nature of camera shake is that there's a bell-shaped distribution of how much camera shake you'll get in a given shot at a given shutter speed. And if you shoot like Shen did one of those at a 15th of a second handheld, and he got it really not much of any camera blur, which was great. It's good technique. He almost certainly braced his arms against his body and the camera against his forehead, and maybe even leaned up against a pole. Those are all things that can minimize shake on slow shutter speeds. But if you take one picture with a slow shutter speed, you have a fairly high likelihood of getting an objectionable amount of camera shake in the picture. If you take two, you've slightly improved the odds that one of the two has less objectionable camera shake. If you take 5, amazing, I did it. I got you your full screen. Okay, so we're going to talk about depth of field. All right, I don't want to get lost in all of the tech stuff, but you know that your camera is focused at a particular distance, and stuff that's at the focus distance is real sharp. Stuff that is close to the focus distance is fairly sharp. Stuff that is fairly far away from the focus distance is fairly blurry. And that's true for things that are either closer to the camera than the focus distance, or things that are farther from the camera than the focus distance. The zone of sharp focus extends farther behind the plane of focus than it does in front of the plane of focus. Enough of technical gobbledygook. Okay. So the depth of field is the range of distance within the subject that is acceptably sharp. It varies with a bunch of things, but particularly the focusing distance and the lens opening or aperture. Okay. If we're looking at a gigantic print with our nose touching the print, then depth of field is less because we can see very small bits of out of focusness. If we're looking at a 4x6 snapshot taped to the wall on the other side of a very big room, we don't have much of a sense of depth of field because we can't see a great deal of detail in a tiny print a long distance away. All right, so looking at the two pictures on the left, what's noticeably different about the bottom picture from the top, Don?
Well, the bottom picture doesn't have the background in focus.
Exactly. Does everybody see that the utility pole that's coming from the guy's right shoulder is in pretty sharp focus in the top picture, whereas it's nigh unto completely blurred in the bottom picture?
Mhm. Yeah.
Okay.
And wasn't Ansel Adams the one that did a lot of F-64? Or...
Yes, exactly. Adams was such a fan of shooting at tiny lens openings, very small apertures, F-64, that he and his friends formed a informal photography group that they called F-64. The trick here is that they were shooting with 8-inch by 10-inch film cameras.
On a tripod.
Right. And F-64 will produce really, really sharp pictures with an 8 by 10-inch view camera. F-64 on any of the cameras that you and I own will produce blurry images because of what's called diffraction. We'll get to it in another slide or two. Okay, back to what we talked about several weeks ago. It is confusing that a large lens opening, which is what we've got on the bottom picture, is a small F number. Very confusing. It would be nice if the F numbers were large for large lens openings and small for small lens openings, but they are not. I can't change the vocabulary of photography. So just be it known, f2.8 is a large lens opening. F16 is a small lens opening. Small lens openings go towards the pinhole camera where everything is in focus from near to far. Large lens openings get shallower and shallower depth of field. Now, anybody comment on, between the two pictures of the guy, which one do you like better?
Bottom one.
Okay. And why is that, Shen?
If you want to focus on the guy, you don't want to get distracted by the background.
Exactly.
Even though the bottom one is a little bit more overexposed.
That's true. Yep. Okay. Good. Everybody buy into that? That for a picture of a person with a not very pretty and rather busy background, which is what you got here, that the bottom picture with the large lens opening and shallow depth of field pops the subject out of the background. It makes it obvious that the picture is about the subject and not the background.
Yeah.
Okay, now looking at the pair of pictures on the right, we have 4 and a fraction guitars in the image. The guitar at the right is the closest, the one at the left is the furthest. What do you notice is different between the top picture and the bottom picture?
Top picture
Joanne?
that's a lot sharper.
Go ahead.
A lot
correct.
sharper.
Yeah, if you look at the nearest guitar, it looks about equally sharp in both pictures. But even as you go to the guitar in the middle of the picture, the bottom picture has already got that guitar fairly out of focus. And as you go further left, the guitars get way out of focus.
Yeah.
Joanne, what do you have as a preference between the 2 pictures?
Oh, definitely the one at the top. I think the fact that those 2 guitars are blurry distracts from the whole picture. So I prefer the one at the top.
Fair enough. This is an example of, it's an aesthetic choice. You know, there isn't a, one picture is a grade B plus and the other picture is a grade C minus. They're just different from each other. And depending on what you like and don't like, the one that has more depth of field may be more or less to your preference. Make sense?
Yeah, the store owner wants to like the top one. If you only like the one guitar on the right, then the bottom one is better.
Yep. Okay. Now, here we are varying 2 things, and it'll take us a moment to untangle the impact. The pictures on the left were taken with a telephoto lens, a lens that made things look bigger. Now, that's kind of unintuitive in the sense that the hobo looks to be the same size in all 4 pictures, doesn't he? That was the intention in setting this up. The hobo is the same size in all 4. How is it that the telephoto lens in the pictures on the left has the hobo the same size as the wide angle lens in the pictures on the right? Anybody got a guess?
Yeah.
The
answer is that the camera got moved, okay? The camera is farther away from the hobo in the pictures on the left, and the camera is closer to the hobo in the pictures on the right. If you zoom out, which is what you're doing when you go from telephoto 100 millimeter to wide angle 28 millimeter, your subject and everything else gets smaller if you don't move your feet. The only way the hobo stayed the same size as you zoomed out to the wide angle on the right is that you also moved closer to the hobo. You can get your subject to fill your frame with a bunch of different settings on your zoom, okay? That's the first part of it. You zoomed tight on the left-hand side pictures, and you had to step away from the subject, the hobo, to not have it overfill the frame. You pulled back on the zoom to wide on the right-hand side pictures. You had to move forward closer to the hobo to keep the hobo filling the frame from top to bottom. Does that part make sense to everybody?
Yes.
I'm not worried about the numbers, 100 millimeters and 28 millimeters, but zoomed tight, if you want the subject to fill the frame, you have to move relatively far from the subject. Zoomed back out wide, if you want the same subject to fill the frame, you need to move much closer to the subject. Okay, so that's one choice, is where do you set the zoom ring on your lens, and how far away from the subject do you stand if you want to fill the frame with the subject?
Oh,
The other choice is, do you want a large lens opening or a small lens opening? And let me just state it simply. The top row is large lens openings. The bottom row is small lens openings. And that means with a large lens opening, very little stuff except the subject is in focus. Large lens opening, shallow depth of field, only the subject in focus. Things closer than the subject are out of focus. Things further than the subject are out of focus. Only the things in the same distance as the subject are in sharp focus. Does that make sense?
mhm.
Yeah,
Now-
one of the ways that I was taught that was not to say a small F number is a large lens opening, but that a small number is a small depth of field.
Exactly. Thank you, Sue.
That at F4 you have about 4 feet of depth of field, whereas at 22 you have about 22 feet of depth of field.
And that's a really good way to remember it. Not that those numbers are accurate, but a small aperture number like 4
Equals
is
smaller.
very little depth of field. A large F number like F22 is a lot of depth of field. And looking at the left-hand column, we see exactly that effect. The hobo is in equally sharp focus in both pictures in the left column. Everybody agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah.
But the red car that is further away on the right-hand side is only moderately out of focus in the bottom left picture. In the top left picture, the red car is so far out of focus that you would be hard-pressed to know that it's a car if you didn't get told.
Yeah.
The difference there is that F22 gives you a lot of depth of field. F4 gives you very little depth of field. Because you're focused on the hobo in both cases, and the car is not in the same distance from the camera as the hobo, the small f number, F4, the hobo's in really sharp focus. The car that's further away is in really unsharp focus. The larger f number, smaller lens opening, F22, even though the car is significantly further away than the hobo from the camera, the car is still kind of sort of in focus. Not nearly as sharp focus as the hobo, but far more in focus than in the F4 picture above. Everybody
Yep.
willing to accept that?
Yeah.
Okay.
We
Now,
believe
on
it.
the question, on the 100 milli, no, wait a minute. Yeah, on the 100 millimeter on the bottom and the 28 millimeter on the bottom,
Mhm.
it's like the car moved closer to the hobo and further away, depending on, and they're
Now,
both
the
at
reality
22. Yeah,
is that neither the car nor the hobo moved from where they were in the
Mhm.
two pictures on the bottom. But you're absolutely right. The car is about a little more than half the height of the hobo on the left.
Uh-huh.
You know, the roof of the car and the top of the hobo's hat are just about level with each other. And the rear tires are just about at waist level on the hobo. about half the height of the hobo for the car. On the right, the car is only, I don't know, maybe a tenth the height of the hobo,
Mhm. Yeah.
even though the car and the hobo did not move. What moved between the picture on bottom left and bottom right is the camera.
Yes, yeah.
On the one on the bottom left, I already told you, but I'm going to say it again. You had to move farther away from the hobo to fill the frame with the hobo than you did with the picture on the bottom right, because you zoomed out for the picture on the left and had to move farther from the hobo to keep him from overfilling the frame. And you zoomed back and went wide angle for the picture on the right. And therefore, to keep the hobo filling the frame, you had to move close to the hobo. So the two pictures, the distance from the hobo to the camera is much, much further on the left-hand column than on the right-hand column.
Hey,
You
Rick,
guys
the
accept that?
bottom right is way too busy. You see all
Yes.
of the cars, you see all of the
Yeah.
buildings.
You're right, absolutely.
But
You would
Not
the-
great composition.
Right.
The bottom left, a few weeks ago, remember that I think Orange County Register took a photo in Huntington Beach to show people are not keeping social distance, and the governor was mad at it. Actually, it was a telephoto lens. It compressed everything to make everybody seems to be closer to each other.
Yes. So
Good point.
here's the trick. If I'm going to pick some numbers, and they may not be the reality, but they'll be simple numbers. Let's say on the bottom left that the hobo is 20 feet away from the camera, and the car is 20 feet beyond the hobo, or 40 feet away from the camera.
Right.
Okay? Now, on the right, it's still a 20-foot distance back from the hobo to the car. Neither the hobo nor the car moved. But when we went from 100 millimeters to 28 millimeters, we moved closer to the hobo with the camera. So now let's say, for the sake of discussion, that the hobo is 5 feet away from the camera. We went from 20 feet away from the camera with the zoomed out lens to 5 feet away with the wide angle lens. Now, the distance from the camera to the car is 5 feet to the hobo plus another 20 feet to the car, total of 25. Here's the key to the out of focus background. The ratio of camera to hobo versus camera to car distance on the left is 1 to 2, 20 feet versus 40 feet. The ratio of camera to hobo versus camera to car on the right is 5 feet to 25 feet, 5 to 1. 2 to 1 difference in distance on the left, 5 to 1 difference on the right. That means that the relative size of the car to the hobo got bigger with the 2 to 1 distance to them
Mhm.
on the left
Yeah.
versus the 5 to 1 difference in distance on the right. You changed perspective. That's the first time I've used that word here. And that is the big deal for what I want you to get out of today's slideshow. You can turn your zoom ring and you can exclude stuff from the edges of the picture or add stuff to the edges of the picture. That's what turning the zoom ring does. It changes the angle of view, what's in and what's out. You can change the perspective, but not with the zoom ring. You change the perspective by moving your feet.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yeah, it would
And
be really nice if there was a slide that showed the setup, where the camera
Yeah, I
is,
agree, it
where
would
the
be.
hobo is, where the
It would.
car is.
it would. I'm having to give you a word description of it, and depending on how well you hear words, you may be having a hard time. But
You can draw a picture
Being
next time.
much closer to the hobo on the right causes the perspective to emphasize the hobo over the car. And you can choose the combination of a large or a small lens opening and how close you are to the subject versus the background, and get changes both in how sharp things are and how large they are. And that gives you all kinds of power over composition. And I'd absolutely agree with what Don said. The bottom right picture is far and away the loser here. It just is cluttered and ugly. The top left picture, in my estimation, is the keeper of the four. But you might have your own opinions about where the ones on the bottom left and the top right fall. But the important takeaway is that by moving your feet and by moving the zoom ring on the camera, you can change the perspective. And that is a super powerful tool for getting a picture that you like better. You can make up your own mind whether you like the tight picture on the right with the wide angle or the compressed picture on the left with the telephoto. But it's a powerful weapon at your disposal. Don't only turn the zoom ring to get a different picture. Move your feet as well as considering turning the zoom ring. Again, I do not recommend stepping 20 feet forward from the rail of the Grand Canyon. It's a nasty stop at the bottom of that fall. But a lot of the time, you can move your feet. And to go back to Bonnie's picture from the Circle of Orange with the fountain, and she was unhappy that the tree was impinging in the background. If she could have moved a pretty small distance to the right on that picture, still pointing the camera at the fountain, the tree that's at the right background would have moved away from being behind the fountain. It would have moved to the right in the image as she moved right and rotated her camera left to keep the fountain centered. And all she needed to do was to get a little bit of blue sky between the right-hand edge of the fountain and the tree, and she then could have cropped the image to take the tree out altogether.
Yeah, the palm tree was on the other side.
Yeah.
Yeah. It may
Then you
be
would have
that
gotten the other
if you
tree.
moved a little bit to the right, the red car that's seen here was going to run you over. But
Now, Rick, that
Yes.
explains how, when I was showing my children how big the mouse was or the rat was that I caught, I held it closer to the camera and they were amazed
exactly.
at how big
Yes.
that rat was.
Yeah. Okay.
Whereas
I've
if you had
beaten this
stood
one
as
into the
far away
ground.
as I would have stood, it would have looked like a very tiny mouse.
Okay.
This is a great explanation. I don't know if I can do it, but it's a great explanation.
Yeah, I did not give you any answer of how do you set the aperture on your camera. Here we can see if your lens has a aperture ring on it, then that's how you can set the aperture. That's the way it was with the cameras that we had when we were young. There was an aperture ring on the lens barrel. And a few modern cameras work that way. Fuji's cameras are beautifully set up to be controlled the way our old-time film cameras were. All of the Fuji interchangeable lenses have an aperture ring. The nicer Fuji interchangeable lens cameras have a dedicated shutter control dial on top of the camera body, just like in the old days. They have a dedicated ISO or ASA or sensitivity knob on the top of the camera. So you simply twist the aperture ring on the lens to get the lens opening. You twist the shutter speed dial on the camera to get the shutter speed, and you twist the ISO dial on the camera to get the sensitivity. That is far and away the nicest feature of the Fuji cameras. Unfortunately, doesn't work that way on my iPhone. There are no knobs, no dials. So it varies from camera to camera, but let's not dive into it with 6 minutes left. Let's talk about that one of the two remaining classes, okay?
Okay.
If you do have a focus ring and an aperture ring on your lens, which is not very frequent on modern digital cameras, they actually have these scales that'll give you a clue what the depth of field is. But with your digital camera, the answer to what kind of picture am I going to get is available by clicking the shutter and looking at the display. Okay?
Amen.
You don't need super sophistication having memorized a 300-page manual. You can take the picture and see what you get. Now, if you don't know how to change anything, it's hard to take another picture and see what the impact was. So we can talk more in the next 2 weeks about how you can change shutter speed, how you can change aperture, how you can change sensitivity. But that's what this slide is showing. Okay. And by the way, while I am thinking about it, going back here, the homework assignment for next time is to try to reproduce something to this effect. I want you to take advantage of the zoom on the camera lens, okay? So take pictures zoomed all the way out and pulled all the way back. Get yourself set up like here with the hobo in the car, two subjects that'll sit still for you. I really don't care what they are. They can be a stuffed animal and the furniture on the other side of the room. Your choice of convenient objects. One of them near, one of them far. And try to reproduce the effect that you see here. Take pictures with the foreground subject showing the full height of the frame, just as the hobo is the full height of the frame in all four of these pictures. And move the camera close with the lens zoomed wide and far from the hobo with the lens zoomed out to telephoto. Get the same size of the hobo in both pictures and see how the object you've got in the background changes in size and particularly see that when you are farther away, the pictures that are on the left, you don't have to move nearly as far left to right to dramatically change what's in frame in the background, okay? The pictures that you see here on the right, if you wanted to get the red car out of the picture altogether, you'd have to move a long ways left or right before the red car would disappear off the left-hand side or the right-hand side of the frame. Whereas the pictures on the left, you'd only have to move a few feet to the right while still pointing the camera at the hobo before the red car would disappear off the right-hand edge of the frame altogether and not be part of the background. When you're zoomed out further from your subject, you get a smaller portion of the world visible in the background. You know, the picture on the bottom left, the background width is about, what would you say, 2.5 car widths, something like that. The picture on the right, the background is, I would say, maybe 8 or 10 car widths from side to side. So experiment with a near thing and a far thing and the zoom on your lens and see how the perspective changes, even though you're not changing the size of the subject in the picture. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Right. Do you also want us to change the depth of field if we can?
Yeah, if you can, go with the large lens opening and a small lens opening just get the F numbers different from each other and take the two perspective pictures at a large lens opening and at a small lens opening so that you end up with 4 pictures that correspond to these. Anyhow, that is pretty much it for today.
And if you can step outside of it and get a picture of where the camera is, where the foreground thing is, and where the background thing is, that would help me a lot.
Yeah. Okay, I'm going to
As
go ahead
Rick
and
said,
wrap it up.
Failure is a better teacher than success.
Yeah.
Then I must be
Okay.
learning a lot.
I am
Yeah.
too.
Thank you, guys. Thank you, Rick, Susan, and everybody.
We'll see you
Appreciate
next
guys
in
very
week.
2
much.
weeks.
Next week.
Oh, that's right. You're going to be gone. Have fun.
Yep. Yep. Thank you.